Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
Well, real estate's an interesting thing because it's one of the few things, it's like the hat trick of building wealth. Like you get the property appreciation of the actual asset growing when you put money into the property. Two, you now get to open yourself up to all the business deductions and tax write-offs that all the large corporations and businesses have. And then three, you have cash flow.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we focus on human connection and what brings us together. I'm Moshe Popack, and today, how to build generational wealth. My guest is Candy Valentino, a powerhouse in the world of business leadership, finance, and investing. Candy has over 22 years in real estate investing and over 24 years in scaling, acquiring, and exiting businesses. She's also an acclaimed speaker, an accomplished author, and the host of the hit podcast, Generation Wealth. If you're ready to achieve financial freedom, this is a can't miss episode. Before we play the interview, a quick reminder that if you like the show, please subscribe and follow me on social media at @mpopack. Now, here's my conversation with Candy Valentino. Enjoy. Hi, Candy, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And I want to go back. I always like to go back to foundation. Take us back to kind of the picture 22 years ago when you decided to get into real estate, because that's kind of my box, and I advocate for people to invest in real estate. So I want to kind of hear kind of the background story of your journey.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting because when 22 years ago, when I first started to get into real estate, I was already in business. I was in business when I started my first company when I was 19. So I was already in business for a couple of years, and I was starting to make a little bit of money. And I thought, wow, like I have this money now. I'm going to go buy the car I always wanted, a Jeep. And I was like, I'm going to go buy this Jeep. And I went and priced Jeeps out. And as I was leaving my business the one day, I was walking by this house that had like a sticker on the window, this big stickers, bright pink, neon pink. And I was like, what is that? And I walked over, and here it's a foreclosure sign. And I was like, what is all of that about? And I started researching and calling, and I had a client at my business who was a real estate agent. And so I called her and I was like, hey, there's this house a couple doors down. I saw it. Can you get me some information? Long story short, it turns out that house was less than the car that I was just going to buy. And so I sat in my office at 21, I think it was about 21 years old. And I did a cost analysis of, okay, this is what that car would bring me. This is how much it would cost. This is what my payments would be. This is how much this house would be. But I knew that the houses in the area were selling for 5-6 times that same price. And my dad's pretty handy. I grew up in a garage, so I kind of felt I was pretty handy and could do a lot of stuff myself. And so I bought that foreclosure. And that was my first experience into real estate, was buying a $23,000 house that had, an inch slope because the floor joists were all cracked and the roof needed replaced and it needed new siding. And that was kind of my first start into real estate. And so I bought that property, fixed it up, didn't know any of these fancy terms that people talk about, ARV and BRRR, like those weren't a thing. Like I was just doing it. And then realized I didn't really like to be a landlord, but that house was worth so much money. So I ended up rented it for a little bit and then sold it and cash flowed. And it was kind of like the real life lesson of what a lot of people talk about. And it was a light bulb moment that a lot of my friends were just graduating graduating college. They were partying, they had hobbies, and I had found a hobby that paid me as opposed to me paying it. So I was hooked.
Yeah. No, I love that. And everyone always asks, okay, how do I begin? And I want to go to that exact point because that's also how I started. It was during the recession, 2008, 9, and someone knew someone at the bank from the special asset division, and there was a property in foreclosure. And I always say everything, whether it's a property or whether it's a business, it's always about the price you pay, right?
Yeah.
So if you're paying rock bottom, like how low, you fall out of the basement window, how low can you fall, right? So you make mistakes, but might as well make mistakes when you've paid very little. You want to buy, and you want to create that sweat equity and create that value. By the way, how much did you end up selling after you fixed up that house? How much did you end up selling that house for?
About 125,000.
Look at that, right? That's amazing, right? So you're your young 20s and look at that money. And I'm sure, so then from there, did you decide to flip properties? Did you decide to buy and hold real estate? Where'd you go from that? So you saw this cash, and kind of where did the trajectory take you the next 10, 15 years from there?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about real estate is there's so many verticals inside of it, right? And there's so many ways that you can make money in real estate. It's like oftentimes people think there's only, you could only flip or you can only have rentals, but there's so many different ways that you can make passive income. For me, I literally tried them all because I think you have to try them all to kind of see which one you like, which one's more profitable, because the beautiful part of life is we can make money doing anything. So why not make money doing something that we kind of enjoy or love, let alone that we hate? So I realized I did not like being a landlord, even though I do know that would have probably been the best route to make passive income continuously. What I actually enjoyed was the design process and running the job. So I'm my own general manager on all of my properties and my renovations. I design everything. I source all the materials. I run all of it, and I just have subs. When I was in Pennsylvania originally, where I started real estate investing, I had all of my own people. Because like you said, you got to buy the property right. That's the number one most mistake that people make that'll kill the deal, is not buying it for the right price. But the second is not having the right support if you yourself can't do a lot of the work yourself. So they underestimate the renovation costs, and then they end up being upside down when they go to exit that property. What I was really good at was knowing all of those people to be able to say, like, this is the electrician I go to, this is the roofer that I go to, this is who does siding, this is who does masonry, so that I could really quickly, when I walked into a house, figure out about how much that was going to cost to do the renovation the way that I typically do them, which is right. I don't cut any corners. I don't do lipstick on a pig. Like, I make it a really great house that people will love and of high quality. So I took the money from that and I literally just went and did it again. Rinsed and repeat is like what I call it.
Sure.
So went and bought another house, or instead of 23,000, this was a foreclosure that was 75,000, but it was twice the size. Then sold that one. Then from there, I went and bought one for 250,000. That was in a foreclosure. It was a 14-bedroom nursing home, converted it back to a single family estate. Then from there, so it just basically, I flipped my money into the next property, using a section 1031 exchange, being able to take that money and put it in escrow. You're not paying taxes on it, so that you can continue to move that money every 180 days. So there's a lot of ways depending on where someone is on their real estate journey. But if I break it down to somebody who's never done it before, especially in this market, you can get eaten alive if you don't do the due diligence. Anybody that just sees HGTV or hears us talking is like, oh yeah, I want to get in the real estate market, and they just go out and buy a house. They have a higher percentage of failure than they do to succeed if they don't do the research and make sure that they're buying the house right. One of the best ways that you can buy a house, your first rental property, is, if you haven't bought a house before, is to buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quad apartment building, live in one of the units, renovate all the others, have people rent from you, live there for a year so you can qualify for an FHA loan. You need little money down, and then replace yourself in that unit after a year and rinse and repeat. That's one way that you can quickly develop doors and have your living expenses paid.
Yeah, that's a very practical tip. I think that's exactly right. Your first piece of real estate, instead of paying rent where you live, you buy where you live. And I also like the worst looking property in the best location, right? Yeah. So you try to find, and that's the value that you create. And then if your main source of income is a business, I always think about, okay, then buy the office condo, right? Don't pay rent, because there's also, obviously we can get into that, the benefits of depreciation and what, under Trump's administration, what they passed is bonus accelerated depreciation as well. So you get like amazing, on your tax return, great tax incentives that you don't, I always say penny saved, penny earned. If in reality, every other business, right? Every other business, let's just say the state, federal, and city tax, maybe almost 40% of every dollar. That means 1/3 of the year, it's going out the door, right? It's going out the door. In real estate, you can compound, and it stays in the asset. It stays in the asset and compounds out, and then you could always refinance after you create the value.
Well, real estate's an interesting thing because it's one of the few things, it's like the hat trick of building wealth. Like you get the property appreciation of the actual asset growing when you put money into the property. 2, you now get to open yourself up to all the business deductions and tax write-offs that all the large corporations and businesses have. And then 3, you have cash flow. So it's a great way for your money to make money on it and then also to appreciate while it's in it. And it's the only way, real estate and commercial property is the only way that you get access to tax deductions that you don't have to spend. And what that means is when you have a business, you have to spend money to get a deduction. But in real estate, you get a phantom expense, depreciation. So you get to depreciate a property that doesn't require you spending more money to take that depreciation. And it's literally the only thing in the tax code that allows you to do that. So there's a lot of ways that you can make money in real estate, but it's really the hat trick to building wealth. And it's available to anyone. Like our government is set up for people to buy houses. Like they're giving you money. It's almost impossible to get a business loan if you don't have any, credit or collateral unless you go through the SBA. But to actually buy a property, it's like the government incentivizes people to do it. So take advantage of it so that, the BlackRocks of the world don't continue to just build more and be able to like pinch out the little guy. But you got to make sure that you do your due diligence. I see that a lot of first-time real estate investors won't take the time to check the sold comps and to really see what the square footage price is of houses that are selling, not just houses that are listed. And that's when you can get into a situation. The beauty is, though, if you get into a situation like that, the other awesome part about real estate is it's flexible. If you get into a property and all of a sudden, oh gosh, I wanted to flip this, but I can't sell it. Well, now you maybe flip it into a long-term hold and maybe you just rent that property. Maybe you take it into a short-term rental and you do an Airbnb situation because you bought it at the right place. There's so many different ways that you can kind of get yourself out of trouble, if you will. But if you invest in the stock market and you pick the wrong stock at the wrong time, there's not much you can do except for to buy it on the way down, which now you need more capital in order to do that.
Control that. Yeah. I'll just give you, I had a property that was under contract and the market's going crazy right now. And that contract just fell out. So exactly to your point, now, instead of us selling the property in the short, that was our short plan. I always think about that in business is the constant pivoting. So now we have to pivot. We're going to our lenders that we have relationships with, and we're going to refinance because we took a bridge loan, which is more expensive money, and we're going to lock it away with long-term financing. Talking about other businesses, I know also your passion is basically, launching businesses and scaling them. I think in this environment, super tough to figure that out. I speak to a lot of people, figure out the startup phase and then seeing it actually through and what does that take? So explain to me kind of when you're giving advice and what you're thinking about in your mind, someone thinking about starting a business and then scaling a business. What are the things you think about?
So some of the challenges right now and why people aren't really sure the advice to listen to is oftentimes who you hear talking about business, they actually are in the startup phase. They're actually in their first business. They're in business for just a few years. They're maybe just doing their first few million. And now they're out there teaching people what they've done. But to be successful in business once for a few years is actually not that hard. But to sustain it and do it over time is a completely different skill set. And entrepreneurs like to get caught up in this ideation process where they want to ideate and start up, ideate and create. But ideas don't build multi-million-dollar companies. It's the implementation and execution of the idea sustained over time that does. And that's where most people fall short because they don't have the discipline or the focus to play the long game. Growth in business is easy. There is only 4 ways that you can increase your sales in business. And there's only 2 ways you can build a business more. You either increase sales or decrease your expenses. That's it. But if you want to increase your sales, you either add a new customer acquisition, you get an existing customer to buy from you more frequently, buying frequency, you increase their average cart or their average ticket, which those two things cost a heck of a lot less than getting a new customer, or you raise your prices, right? That's it. The only way that you can grow your revenue. And a lot of times people think business growth is business scale, but they're two totally different skill sets and fundamentals in business. So to grow a business right there, if your audience did nothing but those four things, looked at those four things, raise your prices is what most people go to, but it's often not the correct one. Right. But developing a customer acquisition strategy of how you get new people in, how you get them to buy from you more frequently, and how you get them to spend more with you, those three things, if implemented today and actually done a strategy based on the data in your business, you'll grow your business. Scaling it is different. Scaling it is to be able to grow your sales, not in the same congruence with your expenses. Oftentimes we grow by adding another location, hiring new team, bringing on this new product that now we have to develop and sell and do R&D behind it. But in order to scale, it's so that your actual base is built in your company. And now your growth of your business, your gross sales is outpacing your expenses. How do you do that? That's when you start to develop systems and processes to optimize a business. And most people can't do that because they haven't been in business long enough to see the patterns that are really clear in how you identify when to scale. Because if people try to scale too soon, they'll actually grow past a few of these benchmarks that we call them, like the ones, the threes, and the eights are typically the hardest to scale past, 1 million, 3 million, 8 million, and then it repeats. If they don't fix a few things and have a few processes, they'll typically try to grow past it, and then they'll fall back and they'll actually lose sales, or they'll deplete their profitability because they're trying to grow and scale too quickly.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, that difference, because I didn't think about it that way, but that's exactly correct. To keep those expenses, because the bottom line, I always think about it in three boxes in life. Money's going out the door. It could either be not-for-profit, things that you want to donate to, and that's a different box, or it could be things for family. But in the box of business, it's either a widget or a service. And to your point, right? And it all comes down to the bottom line, which is the NOI. Everyone wants to talk about noise, ideas, things. My grandfather had it right. He always used to say, okay, if someone can't explain to you on the back of a napkin, let's just say a starting business, very simple. Money comes in, money goes out, and there's leftover money, okay? And in that, which all the partners and all the people involved, which are some employees, some of equity, whatever it is, that there's enough in the machine, or whatever that cow is, the cash cow or whatever is doing, there's enough in that machine that everybody makes money, it ain't going to be sustainable, I always think about that. And what's interesting for me, a lot of people come to me, oh, can you invest in here? Can you do this? I say, okay, here's the deal. I will do it. I want you to send me an email or a text message. Very simple, okay? Show me bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, how and in what amount of time that you have to see the movie. That's also very important, right? You talk about scale or growing a business. I always think about that. Like, you have to be able to see, have clarity, exactly what it takes, because you're constantly pivoting. Business is not for everybody. You have to have the ability to just stand there when crazy stuff is going on, right? Oh, wow, I'm going to go bankrupt. I know I had that experience just now going into COVID. I told my wife, I was like, by the way, there's no evictions. We might go bankrupt. That's the story, right? So the personality, you have to check yourself, really. You have to check yourself. Am I really able to be resilience in the face of crazy headwinds?
Yeah, and I think there's a few things that any successful entrepreneur, like if someone's listening and wanting to go into it, right? Resilience is one, being resilient, being persistent, like relentlessly persistent. People always say like, oh, well, what was it about you? I'm like, look, I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any connections. I didn't have rich parents. I had no money. I didn't even have an internet, but I was relentlessly freaking persistent. I was resilient when shit came up. I was okay with responsibility and not having all the answers. And that's another key too, when we talk about scale, is sometimes like our business is limited by us as the founder. us as the CEO, us as the entrepreneur. And it's an ego game for a lot of people to be able to not only say that, but to do something about it. Sometimes your business has more potential to grow than you can actually take it. So the faster that you can replace yourself and your business with somebody else that has a different skill set, a complementary skill set that you can grow the business beyond your ability, that's key in order to scale a really big business and have an exit. It's how can I replace myself? Who can I align myself with? Yes, in the beginning and even your first few million, you can develop your own skills and yes, invest in yourself and do that. But there may come a point where you actually have to remove yourself out of the business. And it's really what any investor that's coming to acquire you or that wants to merge or just wants to buy your business is ever going to look at. They want to see, obviously, your profitability, because you need sales to grow a business, but you need profitability to sustain it. They want to look at your solvency and your ability to pay back any of the debts that you have, but they also want to look at your organizational efficiency of how well that organization can grow without you. And sometimes owners fail to replace themselves in their business. So they start like majoring in all the minor things and holding on to all these little things. And they're really what their job is to grow the company further, to be able to hire more people, to have more sales, have more locations, whatever business that you're in, and be okay that sometimes you're not the person that's going to take it there.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very, very important thing. Is also it should never be your definition that exactly you can be there, you could be replaceable, and it has nothing to do with you. I'm constantly thinking about, like I tell my guys all the time, I'm like, listen, I'm available. First of all, tell me the worst news first part of the day, and it'll go on me. You talk about accountability. If you want to be a founder, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to jump first, and you have to deal with the worst possible things that could happen before anybody else. That goes on you. That's on you, and that goes to being comfortable in that space. And that's kind of like where my headspace is. So you tell me the worst news, and then the good stuff will take care of itself. But also, I try to empower. You're telling me I hired you, and you told me that you know how to do this. I'm available for any issues. Do it. Show me how to do it. You do it. I'm with you. I got your back. I believe in you. Do it. Right? That's kind of always what I'm thinking, whether I'm investing in a new business with another partner or with the people I work with, because we're only one person. No one person has only strengths. It's strengths and weaknesses, and exactly to your point, complementing each other. Right? Understanding, being so self-aware who you are and what you're not, and there's no ego involved with that. It just is. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Common Denominator podcast. My guest this week is Candy Valentino, a powerhouse in the worlds of business leadership, finance, and investing, and she's providing expert advice on building generational wealth. Next week, I'll chat with the husband and wife team of Steve and Lisa Costa. Their digital content creators and their often hilarious videos have taken the internet by storm. They'll share the steps you can take to create terrific content and monetize it, so you can ditch that 9-to-5 job once and for all. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Now, back to the show. I know also, and it probably comes from your background. We talked a little bit about the show, before the show, that gratitude and spirituality. Tell me how you kind of came into that. It's super important in your life, and why is that, and how you kind of came into that space.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. Some people use gratitude as a tool as opposed to actually having it. I see a lot of this on this online space where people are they're talking about gratitude as if doing it is going to get something, right? And I think that that's the key distinction. Having gratitude for truly what you have, even while you're growing and stretching and wanting more. It's not like you can't appreciate what you have while you want more. It's an and, it's not an or. And so I feel like what happened for me was when I was a kid and we didn't have a lot, I think like the very first thing that happened is one, when you don't have a lot and then you have something, you're really grateful for it. Like that's just, I think, a bottom line, no matter what, because you know what it's like to live without it. So once you have it, it's kind of like, wow, this is really amazing. But for me, it was when I was maybe 7 or 8, the first time. Anybody that's on the East Coast, because I think these are only East Coast stores, but have you ever heard of Hills department store? They were like a box store like Walmart and GB's before they were a thing. And we used to go into this Hills department store and they had Christmas trees and they had these little cards on a tree and it had a wish list from a little kid that was even in foster care or, had a single parent. I remember taking these trees off and would see the kid's name and their age and the little toy, like one toy is all they were asking for. And I remember taking the name off the tree and wanting to get that present for that kid, but also understanding that, we didn't have a lot. My parents were teenagers when they had me. My, dad worked his guts out to try to provide. My mom cleaned houses. And so, it was like knowing that I was going to get one less toy, but I knew that I had more than that kid. And so once I got that toy for that kid and we wrapped that up and shipped it, I remember those moments more than anything I got as a child. Like I'm sure whatever I got as a toy that I really wanted that year is in some dump somewhere at the bottom of the pile. But I remember those kids, they would send us little pictures with their toy or their jacket or whatever. And I just remembered that feeling. And I remembered thinking as I was building wealth, I remember buying a building and buying other things and building other businesses. And I remember leaving my business one day. I was probably about 25 years old. And I was just driving by a building that I bought, a commercial building on the corner of town. I had no clue what I was going to do with it, but it was a deal. So I bought it. And I remember looking at that building and looking up at all the other things that I had because I wanted to buy this whole street. And I had only had about half at that point. And I remember thinking, how do I have all of this that I didn't have before, and I still feel empty? And it was like a voice, just like you and I are talking, said, put your animal shelter there. And I remember thinking, wait, like it was a voice that came to the point where I was in my big Escalade and I looked behind to be like, wait, what? But I never wanted an animal shelter. I never thought about opening an animal shelter. I was in the middle of building an empire, businesses, real estate. And it was at that moment, it was like the understanding of everything I have, but yet how I missed the freaking point. That what I was building wasn't about me. What I was learning wasn't even about me. What I felt in that moment was, call it God, call it the universe, whatever your listeners believe in. But I felt like I was being prepared for something more, for something beyond me that wasn't really my doing. And from that moment on, I decided, all right, I'm going to open a nonprofit, even though I had had 4 other buildings secured, that I was going to expand my business. I was in talks of doing franchising, like all these different things. It was like a hard right turn that was so confusing, but it made complete sense. And from that point on, I just really realized that this life isn't about what we can create. And if someone wants to learn from me or you or someone else on the internet, and if you miss the point of why you want to build wealth and why you want to be successful, and you fail to recognize that it's not about you, it's truly about what we can contribute, I promise you that you will get to the end of your life at some point and look back with so much regret, because no amount of boats, no amount of doors, no amount of cars, no amount of vacation houses can ever give you fulfillment. It's the dopamine hit of happiness that often people are seeking with ego and status, but happiness is so fleeting. Yeah. It's so fleeting. Fulfillment is what lasts, and being able to contribute, being able to be grateful, and being able to give has brought me far more joy than anything else I have ever built myself.
And I'll tell you something. So I remember reading about Eckhart Tolle, and he was sitting on a park bench and he had nothing, deep depression. And all of a sudden, that realization, you talk about that realization, and I believe in this world, I've met many, many different people. It's either people are on that frequency, which means they've really seen something beyond nature. We call it nature, whatever you want to call it. And they're there. They realize they found the beginning of their journey. I say we journey alone and we arrive together. And they go and that's it. That's exactly, they can pinpoint exactly the moment that their whole life, right? I hope, with the show, and I hope that people don't have to hit rock bottom. I hope that people don't have to see, because in the end, you live with yourself. So imagine a place where you're living in a place of gratitude and abundance and understanding that there's meaning and purpose, and you go to that place, right? Imagine you could do that, and with nothing. You don't need anything. So it's everything to lose and nothing to lose, all in the same flow, if you want to call it that, right? And then the work you do, because you know yourself, it's only you, and you're just working in that space. So there's many of us, and what I would love is one day to get all of us in the world together that understand that frequency. So it's frequency and vibration. That's what we are, and it's the other narrative. Someone said to me, "Oh, why don't you?" And he was talking about like the podcast. Why don't you communicate in this way on the podcast? I said, for the establishment, I said, there's so many tools for that. I said, I'm talking to the other 50%. I said, that's the other side, right? And someone mentioned about like the second mountain. That's where we are. We don't know, and it's going to take the rest of our lives. And I always say about Les Brown, he always says, and you talk about regret. The greatest pain that we can have is the pain of regret. Mm-hmm. So I say people to have a plan, to go with your passion, to see the thing that keeps you up at night. That's exactly your definition. That's what I see. So I appreciate that. Any guest that ever talks like you're speaking, I have just tremendous, again, gratitude towards that. And I know also you wrote a book, Wealth Habits, 6 Ordinary Steps to Achieve Extraordinary Financial Freedom. What's one or two kind of key points that stick out in your mind about the book?
So we talk a lot about, the ordinary things. Like that's because there's nothing extraordinary about me. I didn't do anything extraordinary. It's just a bunch of ordinary and often very boring things compounded over time that gave me the life that I have now. But I think some of the key parts of the book is understanding, self-education is a continued thing, making sure that we are always educating and uplifting ourselves. We talk about real estate. We talk about how to build the Brinks truck of your life and have the protection, because I've seen so many people that have built wealth and have lost it all because of a few key mistakes that they made along the way. I'm so grateful and blessed that I have never had what you're talking about, a rock bottom moment. I know so many personal finance gurus out there that have actually filed bankruptcy, that lost everything. Like I think because I came from a place of never having someone to fall back on if I got into trouble, I've always had to be very strategic and smart as I've gone along. So I really broke down like a lot of the things that we have to do to not just build wealth, to protect wealth as we build it. But I would say one of the most probably proud of the whole book that I kind of did was in our research. We conducted one of the largest studies of broke habits in the country, as well as the habits of the top 2%, where $2 million in net worth or more, and what they've actually done to get there. So that was amazing, because I like to speak from data and facts, not opinions. So that was really cool. I love that. I love the book also is written from a female, which there's very, very few finance books written from a female, especially ones that have actually built it before they wrote the book. Like there are authors that the first successful thing they ever did was write a book and develop a coaching business, right? Which is okay, that's fine, but it comes from a different place of experience. But probably the part that I love the most, and I just want to say, if your audience listening does not want to do this, I would say don't buy the book, because I think this is the most important part. When I was doing the studies of Maslow's work, which was then redacted from Tony Robbins and the 6 Human Needs, and they talked about, all of the things, love and connection and significance and certainty and uncertainty, all of the human needs that people need. It was interesting that there was one thing that was missed in their work that I found from my own life, but also from the studies, is oftentimes we're trying to do the next thing, be successful, build wealth, because we're trying to get significance. We're trying to get certainty. We feel that if we have enough money, we can get love, or at least connection. If we have enough money, we can have variety because then we can go do what we want with whoever we want. If we have money, we can have growth. The one thing that it doesn't give you is contribution, but it gives you the ability to contribute. But of all of a human needs, there's only one that actually provides all the others. And that's contribution. Contribution provides growth. It gives you significance. It gives you certainty. It gives you love, connection. Like being in the nonprofit world for 16 years while building companies and investing, but doing it I never took a dime from the organization. I just did it out of the goodness of my heart to build something that would be a legacy beyond me. That has given me far more than anything I've ever built. And so I think that in the book, it's probably one of the last things people might think of in a book about wealth, but it's literally the last key habit that doesn't just build wealth in your pocketbooks, it builds a rich life. And I feel like if we just are here to build a bunch of money, but we miss building a really rich life, we've kind of done it all for nothing.
I definitely agree. And I know that that very soon you're going to be speaking as a featured speaker in the Self-Made Summit. And that's super important to what you're saying. There aren't many women. I mean, my wife and I, we work together. So she would fall under that box. Okay. I find the headaches and she like organizes it. That's her thing. And then she's a mother of 10 kids. So when I find women that got it right and that understand it, because half the workforce is women. That's just what it is. And so kudos to you. I'm sure people will really appreciate your wisdom. You've lived it. I always say to my kids, to your point, ask when someone speaks, what have they practically done? What have they suffered in? What have they toiled in that gives them the right to speak words out of their mouth where you're internalizing it? If it's nothing, it's wind. See you later. Bye. Mm-hmm. Right? So I like so much that you've done that from where you've come. And I definitely hear the passion and appreciate it. And I know also, and good luck. You also have a podcast, Generation Wealth, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure you teach, right? You're teaching people practical tips how to build their wealth.
Yes.
Right?
No fluff. I always say no fluff, no BS. If that's what you want, wrong podcast. But again, I do that for service. The podcast isn't something that we monetize or that I have any desires to be a number one podcast. It's just a way to just get the message out to more people, because I feel like if we can end suffering, and money is one of the biggest causes of divorce. It's the biggest causes of stress. So, and we're not taught this stuff in school. So we need people talking about how to build wealth, how to invest in things, because it's, we're taught math and history that we can use our phone for now, so it's like, these are the real core principles that people need to hear. So the sooner that we can get the book and the podcast in people's hands, the better off the world will be. And
the same thing, our show also. So it's in service, and anybody that does that, thank you for that. Super appreciated. What is the top thing? Again, just boom, right in your head. The number one thing that you're grateful for.
I'm honestly, it's going to sound so cliche, but I'm grateful for life. Like every day that I wake up, I think of 5 things before my feet hit the floor. And it's normally a roof over my head, health, the sun shining. Like when, I don't know the saying, but there's a saying that a person who has health has a million wishes, but the person that doesn't only has one. And just to be in my 40s and super healthy and tons of energy and really active, like I'm just so grateful. I've lost friends at a young age. My dad had a heart attack in front of me when a few years ago. So I'm just grateful every day for life, for health, and for family.
Thank you. And what is something that people don't know about you?
I don't know. Writing a book, people probably know a lot. I would say one thing that's weird. I learned to drive a car when I was 7. That's a weird thing that most people don't know.
That's cool.
And I've had as many as, I think, 13 animals in my house at once because of being a foster for a lot of foster animals with my work at Heal Animal Rescue. So yeah, those are probably 2 things that are a little unique.
Amazing. And how could, if the audience want to get your book, listen to your podcast, learn more about you, how can they do that?
So Wealth Habits is available everywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it. You can go to my website, candyvalentino.com. There's also a link there for the book, Generation Wealth Podcast on Apple and all the places. And then everywhere on Instagram, TikTok, Candy Valentino.
Thank you so much, Candy. It's really been
Thank
amazing.
you for having me. It was great meeting you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Candy. Next week, I'll speak with digital content creators Steve and Lisa Costa. They'll share the steps they take to create must-see internet content that often goes viral and how you can follow their blueprint, shoot great videos, and make money doing it. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode and follow me on social media at @Popack. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.